But, you know, I'm basically just casting spells and hoping they work, so. Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut. Let the Merbles begin. It's about Billy Pilgrim. He is a World War II veteran, and the book is also about World War II. And Billy Pilgrim. Billy Pilgrim is a time-traveling optometrist. Just like... Is the guy in the Time Traveler's Wife an optometrist? I don't know. Anyways, somebody wears glasses. Billy Pilgrim is a time-traveling optometrist. Or maybe I'm misremembering a joke from a TV show. He served in World War II, fighting in Germany in World War II when he was just a young lad of 19. And he has become unglued in time, because we are all the rest of us are glued in time in a window. We're glued to a window like a fly stuck in a glue trap. But Billy Pilgrim is not. He is unstuck in time. He is flying around like a fly, crashing into a window and then running into a ceiling fan. So we've been enjoying that whole description of his entire life from the age of 19 to like 50. And when Billy Pilgrim was in World War II, when he was 19, he was captured by the Germans and taken to a work camp for prisoners of war. This work camp, sorry for yelling, this work camp consisted of an area in the city of Dresden. Dresden was a civilian and prisoner town, I guess. Like, I don't know. He describes Dresden a lot. And he's like, oh, Dresden was so beautiful, and it was just full of civilians. And then us, American prisoners of war. And then Dresden was bombed by America while Billy was there. And everybody died. And then he came back home. Firebombed. Not just bombed, firebombed. The entire city of Dresden was burned. Billy survived because he was in a prison camp, and they had a bomb shelter. So he went, well, actually the bomb shelter is the cellar of a slaughterhouse called Slaughterhouse 5. Or Schlosselglage Funf. You know? Funf. Slaughterhouse 5. And he survived because he was a prisoner, and they went into like the basement of the slaughterhouse, and it works as a bomb shelter or something like that. And then they walk out of Germany, and he goes home, and then he grows up and he gets married to a woman named Valencia Merbles, and he turns 50 or something. I don't know. He's middle-aged now, and he makes glasses, or he sells glasses. He doesn't make them. He sells them. He's an optometrist. And that's it. We're basically all caught up, you know. I just wanted you guys to know about Slaughterhouse 5. And last week, I did not finish Chapter 9. So we're going to at least finish Chapter 9 tonight. Oh, and I forgot, because I was trying to think of how I wanted to summarize this, like, all day. So I'm sorry, because I'm totally butchering it. But I remembered. So now we're traveling through time. We've seen, like, the war and all of his life in between. I have to burp, I think. No, I'm gonna hold it. And now Billy has, he is like 40 something and he has survived a plane crash because he was going to OptoCon, which is like TwitchCon but for optometrists. He was going to OptoCon. And so insanely, shockingly, his plane crashed into a mountain and everybody died except for him. And after that, he stayed in the hospital for a little while. And he is in a hospital room with a man named Rumford. And Rumford's this, 80-year-old guy. I don't remember what he's in the hospital for, but he has to share a room with Billy. Rumford is a historian, and he's writing a book about something to do with wars. And just by chance, he shares his hospital room with Billy Pilgrim. Oh, he's a historian writing about World War II, which Billy was in when he was 19. And, Rumford is 80 years old. He's got his fifth wife, with him, who is, 23. And he doesn't believe that Billy was in Dresden. Billy has been, I don't know if he hasn't been talking or something, but Billy only speaks up when Rumford is oh. See, I'm remembering the summary right now. I'm so sorry. The only thing Billy does is whine and be a loser. And he's been mumbling in his sleep about, surrendering and saying, "You guys go on without me." And Rumford hears him, mumbling in his sleep and, thinks that his brain's all scrambled. And even if he was in a war, he was, a total coward. And then, all of a sudden, the firebombing of Dresden in Rumford's new book, he's I don't know. He talks about the firebombing of Dresden and how there's actually not a lot written about it. And then Billy speaks up and he's like, "I was there." "Americans have finally heard about Dresden," said Rumford 23 years after the raid. "A lot of them know now that it was much worse than Hiroshima. So I've got to put something about it in my book. From the official Air Force standpoint, it'll all be new." Oh. Ooh. Okay, I found a better place to start. I'm sorry. Time-traveling losers. They are everywhere. His fifth wife's name is Lily. Rumford talked to Lily about the bombing of Dresden one time, and Billy heard it all. Rumford had a problem about Dresden. His one-volume history of the Army Air Force in World War II was supposed to be a readable condensation of the 27-volume official history of the Army Air Force in World War II. The thing was, though, there was almost nothing in the 27 volumes about the Dresden raid, even though it had been such a howling success. The extent of the success had been kept a secret for many years after the war. A secret from the American people. It was no secret from the Germans, of course, or from the Russians, who occupied Dresden after the war, who are still in Dresden still. "Americans have finally heard about Dresden," said Rumford, 23 years after the raid. "A lot of them know now how much worse it was than Hiroshima. So I've got to put something about it in my book. From the official Air Force standpoint, It'll all be new. Why would they keep it a secret so long? Said Lily. For fear that a lot of bleeding hearts, said Rumford, might not think it was such a wonderful thing to do. It was now that Billy Pilgrim spoke up intelligently. I was there, he said. It was difficult for Rumford to take Billy seriously, since Rumford had so long considered Billy a repulsive non-person, who would be much better off dead. Now, with Billy speaking clearly and to the point, Rumford's ears wanted to treat the words as a foreign language that was not worth learning. What did he say? Said Rumford. Lily had to serve as an interpreter. He said he was there, she explained. He was where? I don't know, said Lily. Where were you? She asked Billy. Dresden, said Billy. Dresden, Lily told Rumford. He's simply echoing things that we say, said Rumford. Oh, said Lily. He's got echolalia now. Oh. Echolalia is a mental disease which makes people immediately repeat things that the well people say around them. But Billy didn't really have it. Rumford simply insisted, for his own comfort, that Billy had it. Rumford was thinking in a military manner, that an inconvenient person, one whose death he wished for very much, for practical reasons, was suffering from a repulsive disease. Rumford went on insisting for several hours that Billy had echolalia, told nurses and doctors that Billy had echolalia now. Some experiments were performed on Billy. Doctors and nurses tried to get Billy to echo something, but Billy wouldn't make a sound for them. He isn't doing it now, said Rumford peevishly. The minute you go away, he'll start doing it again. Nobody took Rumford's diagnosis seriously. The staff thought Rumford was a hateful old man, conceited and cruel. He often said to them, in one way or another, the people who were weak deserved to die. Whereas the staff, of course, was devoted to the idea that weak people should be helped as much as possible and nobody should die. There, in the hospital, Billy was having an adventure, very common among people without power in a time of war. He was trying to prove to a willfully deaf and blind enemy that he was interesting to hear and see. He kept silent until the lights went out at night. And then, when there had been a long period of silence, containing nothing to echo, he said to Rumford, I was in Dresden when it was bombed. I was a prisoner of war. Rumford sighed impatiently. Word of honor, said Billy Pilgrim. Do you believe me? Must we talk about it now? Said Rumford. He had heard. He didn't believe. We don't ever have to talk about it, said Billy. I just want you to know I was there. Nothing more was said about Dresden that night. and Billy closed his eyes. Traveled in time to a May afternoon, 2 days after the end of the Second World War in Europe. Billy and 5 other American prisoners were riding in a coffin-shaped green wagon, which they had found abandoned, complete with 2 horses, in a suburb of Dresden. Now they were being drawn by the clop, clop, clopping horses down narrow lanes which had been cleared through the moon-like ruins. They were going back to the slaughterhouse for souvenirs of the war. Billy was reminded of the sounds of the milkmen's horses in the early morning of Ilium when he was a boy. Billy sat back in the jiggling coffin. His head was tilted back and his nostrils were flaring. He was happy. He was warm. There was food in the wagon and wine, and a camera, and a stamp collection, and a stuffed owl, and a mantel clock that ran on the changes of barometric pressure. The Americans had gone into empty houses in the suburbs where they had been imprisoned, and they had taken these and many other things. The owners of the houses, hearing that the Russians were coming, killing and robbing and raping and burning, had fled. But the Russians hadn't come yet, even 2 days after the war. It was peaceful in the ruins. Billy saw only one other person on the way to the slaughterhouse. It was an old man pushing a baby in a buggy. In the buggy, not pushing a baby. Oh my God, I scratched my face. It was an old man pushing a baby buggy. In the buggy were pots and cups and an umbrella frame and other things he had found. Why did that leave a mark on my face? I didn't even scratch it that hard. Things he had found in the baby buggy. Billy stayed in the wagon when it reached the slaughterhouse, sunning himself. The others went looking for souvenirs. Later on in life, the Tralfamadorians would advise Billy to concentrate on the happy moments of his life and to ignore the unhappy ones, to stare only at pretty things as eternity failed to go by. If this sort of selectivity had been possible for Billy, he might have chosen this as his happiest moment. His sun-drenched snooze in the back of the wagon. If this sort of selectivity had been possible for Billy, he might have chosen as his happiest moment his sun-drenched snooze in the back of the wagon. Rubber baby buggy bumpers. Thank you for that. Billy Pilgrim was armed as he snoozed. It was the first time he had been armed since basic training. His companions had insisted that he arm himself, since God only knew what sorts of killers might be in the burrows on the face of the moon. Wild dogs, packs of rats fattened on corpses, escaped maniacs and murderers, soldiers who would never quit killing until they themselves were killed. Billy had a tremendous cavalry pistol in his belt. It was a relic of World War I. It had a ring in its butt. It was loaded with bullets the size of robin's eggs. Billy had found it in the bedside table in a house. That was one of the things about the end of the war. Absolutely anybody who wanted a weapon could have one. They were lying all around. Billy had a saber, too. It was a Luftwaffe ceremonial saber. Its hilt was stamped with a screaming eagle. The eagle was carrying a swastika and looking down. Billy found it stuck into a telephone pole. He had pulled it out of the pole as the wagon went by. Now his snoozing became shallower, as he heard a man and woman speaking German in pitying tones. The speakers were commiserating with somebody lyrically. Before Billy opened his eyes, it seemed to him that the tones might have been those used by the friends of Jesus when they took his ruined body down from his cross. So it goes. Billy opened his eyes. A middle-aged man and wife were crooning to the horses. They were noticing what the Americans had not noticed. That the horses' mouths were bleeding, gashed by the bits. That the horses' hooves were broken, so that every step meant agony. That the horses were insane with thirst. The Americans had treated their form of transportation as though it were no more sensitive than a 6-cylinder Chevrolet. The two horse pitiers moved back along the wagon to where they could gaze in a patronizing reproach at Billy. At Billy Pilgrim, who was so long and weak, so ridiculous in his azure toga and silver shoes. They weren't afraid of him. They weren't afraid of anything. They were both doctors, both obstetricians. They had been delivering babies until the hospitals were all burned down. Now they were picnicking near where their apartment used to be. The woman was softly beautiful, translucent from having eaten potatoes for so long. The man wore a business suit, necktie and all. Potatoes had made him gaunt. He was as tall as Billy, wore steel-trimmed trifocals. Steel-rimmed trifocals. This couple, so involved with babies, had never reproduced themselves, though they could have. This was an interesting comment on the whole idea of reproduction. They had 9 languages between them. 9 languages between them. They tried Polish on Billy Pilgrim first, since he was dressed so clownishly. Since the wretched Poles were the involuntary clowns of the Second World War. Billy asked them in English what it was they wanted, and they at once scolded him in English for the condition of the horses. They made Billy get out of the wagon and come look at the horses. When Billy saw the means of his transportation, when Billy saw the condition of his means of transportation, he burst into tears. He hadn't cried about anything else in the war. Later on, as a middle-aged optometrist, he would weep quietly and privately sometimes, but never make loud boo-hooing noises. Which is why the epigraph of this book is the quatrain form of the famous Christmas carol. Which is why the epigraph of this book is the quatrain from the famous Christmas carol. Billy cried very little, though he often saw things worth crying about. And in that respect, at least, he resembled the Christ of the carol. The cattle are lowing, the baby awakes, but the little Lord Jesus, no crying he makes. Billy traveled back in time to the hospital in Vermont. Billy traveled in time back to the hospital in Vermont. Breakfast had been eaten and cleared away, and Professor Rumford was reluctantly becoming interested in Billy as a human being. Rumford questioned Billy gruffly, satisfied himself that Billy really had been in Dresden. He asked Billy what it had been like, and Billy told him about the horses and the couple picnicking on the moon. The story ended this way. Billy and the doctors unharnessed the horses, but the horses wouldn't go anywhere. Their feet hurt too much. And then Russians came on motorcycles, and they arrested everybody but the horses. 2 days after that, Billy was turned over to the Americans, who shipped him home on a very slow freighter called the Lucretia A. Mott. Lucretia A. Mott was a famous American suffragette. She was dead. So it goes. Damn, I wish my name was Lucretia. Okay, so the Russians came on motorcycles and arrested everyone but the horses. And then 2 days after that, Billy was turned over to the Americans, who shipped him home on a very slow freighter called the Lucretia A. Mott, who is a dead suffragette. So it goes. It had to be done, Rumford told Billy, speaking of the destruction of Dresden. It